So, welcome back again after the networking break. I hope you enjoyed it. As we continue our program, I would like to introduce our next panel discussion, New Enablers for Inclusive Workplaces. The session will be moderated by Shilpi Kapoor, founder and CEO of Barrier Break. Shilpi, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Francesca. So firstly, I just wanted to say thank you to G3ICT for doing such a phenomenal job of hosting this M-Enabling. I think we're all having fun. So let's have a little more of this. So I've got the pleasure of speaking to 5 amazing people today. We're going to be talking about new enablers for inclusive workplaces. But before we start, I'm actually going to ask each of them to introduce themselves. Nobody knows them better than themselves. So I'm going to start with the woman in the room. So Julika, can we start with you?
Sure. Yeah, great to meet everyone. I'm Julika. I'm co-founder and CEO at Mentra. And in a nutshell, we're building sort of like the next LinkedIn for the neurodiverse population with autism, ADHD, dyslexia, epilepsy, and cognitive variations of the human brain. And my team and I are based in North Carolina, in Charlotte, in fact. And what brought me into this space is my brother Vikram, who's a non-speaking autistic individual. I myself am neurodivergent, as well as is our team. And we're really excited to build a technology that can empower millions to enter the workforce and find the support and empowerment that they need to succeed.
Thank you, Julika. We've already heard you this morning, so looking to go deeper into the conversation now with you. Jonathan.
Sure. Nice to meet everyone. Jonathan Thurston. I have ADHD. I am the Director of Digital Accessibility for Walmart's Accessibility Center of Excellence. We're a fairly new Center of Excellence, and we're definitely deep into our journey. So a lot of my work focuses on the associate experience, so I'm happy to talk about that today.
Fabulous. Jonathan and I go back, I think, about 8-10 years.
Oh my goodness.
And I think we've got a lot to hear from you. Well, the next person I've got is Manish Agarwal. And interestingly, Manish and I met last, I think, 20 years back, which is quite a lifetime of accessibility. Manish, let's hear about you.
Hi, I'm Manish Agarwal. I'm the co-founder of iAccessible, which is a social enterprise I set up to connect product makers to people with disabilities. I'm blind myself, and in fact, all our team at iAccessible have lived experience of disabilities. We are based on the premise of nothing about us without us. You must have heard it in a lot of these accessibility conferences, and it's really important. It's just not a phrase for us. We are hoping to make accessibility testing, design, and user research be driven by people with disabilities. So that's what we do.
Well, love your mission. Totally agree with that. And that's what we do at Barrier Break. So love that, and more power to you. And with that, we've got Karthik.
Hey everyone, my name is Karthik Kannan. I'm one of the founders and the CTO of Envision. We make smart glasses that help people with a visual impairment to live more independently by using artificial intelligence. The glasses basically have a camera on them that helps a visually impaired person capture images around them, and we extract information and speak it out to them. Apart from our tech being available on smart glasses, Envision is also available as a smartphone app that's being used by over 200,000 people across the world on both iOS and Android. So I'm here all the way from the Netherlands, super excited to be here. It's my first time, so yeah, thank you.
Wow. It's really weird. When I started Barrier Break, we'd done a sketch of certain use cases that we wanted to talk about. And one of them was a sketch of a person sitting in a park, wearing glasses, reading a newspaper, and was a person with visual impairment. And now that I hear you talk about it, it's like a dream that I had then seems to have come into actual. And I think that's really the power of inclusive technology today. And I think we'll talk more about how it applies to workplace now. And then last but not least, Everett, let's hear from you about Ira and you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Everett Bacon. I am the Vice President of Blindness Initiatives for Aira. Aira is spelled A-I-R-A. Aira provides visual interpreting services to blind and low vision individuals. We do this as an accommodations piece. We have partnerships with well-known companies like Microsoft, Walmart, Amazon, Google, Salesforce, and hundreds of other companies. And we're excited to be able to provide this service through a remote desktop app or, of course, a mobile application on your phone. Aira has trained visual interpreters that provide visual information, whatever the blind or low vision individual needs, whether that be navigation information or just seeing what's around them or giving them any kind of visual information, description that you can think of. This is also my first time here, and so I'm excited to be here.
So a lot of first-timers with me, which is amazing. Tells us that the world of accessibility is surely expanding for all of us. So with that amazing, we've got to know them a little. But now let's ask them, one question that everybody can help answer. How do you see innovation and technology in the workplace? And how do you see that become inclusive? What kind of technologies are you seeing? So it's more your personal view and, how do you see it? So I think, Everett, let's start with you this time. Let's see what you think about it.
Sure. Well, we know that everyone has a computer. We know that now the mobile phone is something that is in the workplace and is being used by everyone. And now we see more wearables becoming more prevalent. So the great thing about Aira is we can be offered on glasses such as Kartik has, like his Envision glasses, and we can be offered on different other platforms with mobile access. And so that's how kind of we see that working in the accommodation space. Like we have a partnership with Amazon that we're very proud of. Amazon has found a way to provide the Aira service to individuals who are not only looking for employment, but employees that are also working for Amazon. They can use Aira services to help them with application needs, getting ready for an interview, navigation to a certain interview location, and then they can use the accommodation in the workplace for whatever assignments Amazon might have. And so we think it's wonderful because it's a great way to employ more blind and low vision individuals.
That is such a difference from the world of inclusion in the workplace, let's say 10 years back or even 5 years back, right, where people didn't have access to all of that support. Right, so I think that is a phenomenal perspective, and you actually have a user out here of your product on the podium with us. So Manish, what is your take on inclusion in the workplace and how technology makes an impact there?
So, as you said, it's so different from 10 years ago or 5 years ago. I think the technology change is accelerating at a very rapid pace. So, on the one hand, there is this new opportunity for a lot more inclusion with things like AI describing pictures for me, or the Envision glasses giving me more independent access to content. And at the same time, there is, with all this rapid change, there is this risk that I see of technology not being developed responsibly enough to be inclusive, and the potential of the disability divide becoming bigger just because the rate of change is so high, and everybody's like, go, 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 let's put it out in the market and deploy it. So I think both of these aspects are true today. And the other aspect which is also true in terms of responsibility is this aspect of including people with disabilities as we are developing these technologies and deploying these technologies in the workplaces. That at a faster, more compressed time scale is even harder. And that's the kind of services that we provide at iAccessible, where we encourage companies to go hire people with disabilities, but if they cannot in the time frames, or not everybody and every department can do that, take our services or services like other companies like ours, where people with disabilities can be consulted for these newer initiatives.
That's interesting that, firstly, it has benefited you over these years. And the acceleration that you talk about is something that we also heard in the keynote this morning, where we were literally saying that from last year to this year, technology has shifted so fast, where all of us were in doubt of some of the AI technology that was there last year, are all going out and trying it and seeing how we can use it in our workplaces. And the same thing is going to apply. So I think acceleration is a big thing that is going to promote inclusive workplaces and having more and more people with disabilities join the workforce, I think. Which leads me to you, Jonathan. So what's your take on this, from hiring to tech?
First of all, in my experience, one of the best ways to move the needle with accessibility is to, in fact, hire people with disabilities. There's many organizations that you can partner with or work with if you're trying to start programs and start this initiative within your own company. Accidental Ally is an example of a great company. Another one is Helix. There's different organizations out there that will help support you with this. How do you move the needle without growing your employee base with folks with disabilities? It's the voice of the associate that can really help move that needle. That's probably the number one thing I would recommend you try to accomplish, is to increase the amount of employees that have disabilities. Also to encourage self-identification. This is another tricky area. The numbers that companies often have around self-ID of employees with disabilities is very low. It's not truly representative. And why is that? Well, many reasons, but one big reason is because of stigma. So let's get rid of that stigma. Let's talk about our disabilities. Let's hire folks with disabilities. Let's make a more inclusive workplace by doing that.
Mm-hmm. Angelica?
Absolutely. So I almost think of this question with how technology comes into the workforce as in like twofold. So we have the pre-hire and then post-hire. Before you have someone joining the workforce, I think technology, especially with AI, has this huge potential to really build a more inclusive screening process. This morning we talked about how there's a lot of bias introduced, how AI might be screening out individuals. And I think there's also an opportunity to understand, for folks who don't have traditional backgrounds, who might not have gone to, an Ivy League school or have gotten that work experience or internship experience because of lack of economic access, there's an opportunity to tap into those populations, pre-getting the job, actually expanding talent pools and opening up our channels. And there's boot camps and all sorts of upskilling opportunities outside of, the traditional pathway to employment that we can tap into. So that's before. Then once you get into the job, I think technology, especially tools like ChatGPT, OpenAI, they create this incredible platform to facilitate conversations that are so hard to typically have in the workplace. How do I ask my manager for accommodations? How do I ask them, to change the way that they give me tasks or instructions? How can I deliver feedback to an employee that I didn't like the way that they did, said a certain thing or I felt discriminated against? A lot of those conversations are so hard to navigate, especially when they hit their emotional conversations. And I think AI gives a great, tools like ChatGPT give a great framework to use technology to communicate. I mean, when you go to therapy, they say communication is key, right? That is so important. I think even in the workplace, so many of the challenges that we have as we grow and expand companies is figuring out how to communicate better and support employees that have cognitive variation, have disabilities, and have unique needs that might not be understood by everyone. So I think it's going to help kind of level the playing field. And how do we talk about disability in the workplace? How do we talk about our divergence? Before and after the job. So yeah, excited for the further conversation on how we're doing that.
Interesting. And Karthik, your perspective, you use a lot of AI in what you do, so how do you see technology moving?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a little bit of a dilemma. On the one hand, I feel that companies aren't that proactive in actually adopting new technologies quickly enough. And I also feel, on the other hand, that there can never be just a technology-only solution. Some of the best, most productive workplaces, most inclusive workplaces have been a combination that has used technology but has always had a human in the loop whenever technology doesn't cut it. Sometimes when people use our tools, we notice that they don't get the response that they would like. They're not able to complete the task completely independently the way they'd want. And that time, if there is a human in the loop to actually go out and help them, that makes a huge difference in being able to get the work done. So I feel very strongly that human element is still needed, despite introducing technology in the workplace. We need to always have a human in the loop to help round out the areas where technology can't really function very well, right? At least for now. But I'm guessing that's going to change a lot in the near future.
Interesting. So while we continue our conversation, if anybody has questions, please feel free to start posting it in the Slack channel. I'll keep looking at it through the entire thing. So Everett, let's talk about you, right? Aira was one of the first things that I remember thinking about how it would impact mobility for people with disabilities and give them access to things around them. And you spoke about earlier on how it is literally something that people can use, like how you said Amazon is using it within their workplace. So how do you see people or organizations like Amazon and others adopting Aira? What are the challenges that you see them have in adopting it? And then what do you see are the kind of things that people are doing on a day-to-day basis with Aira at the workplace?
Sure. Thank you for the question. It's interesting. When we first started Aira, I remember I was an adopter of Aira. I was not an employee at the time. At the time, I was working in accessibility for the state of Utah. I'd been in that field for almost 2 decades. And Aira was this wonderful navigation piece. It was supposed to be able to change the way blind people could navigate independently. We found that is, of course, the use of Aira and still a very powerful use case. But what we found was that many blind and low vision individuals were wanting to use Aira in a multitude of ways, whether that be giving a description of something in front of them, whether that be recognizing a product, whether that be getting information on the web so they can navigate an inaccessible website or a mobile application, and on and on and on. There are multiple use cases for it, and that's what's exciting about how we are seeing companies now look at recruiting, and employing, and retaining blind and low vision individuals. We've seen a company now over the past 8 months hire 100 blind individuals, recruit them, hire them, and retain them. But then the other spectrum, we've seen a company that over the last 24 months has only recruited and hired and retained 1 blind and low vision individual. And so there's still a whole lot of area of growth, and we still know that the unemployment rate for blind and low vision individuals is still very high, but yet this is a community that is just hungry for employment. And so we have seen Aira being used in the workplace with helping with making sure that a long email is read and gathered the information accordingly, and helping with editing a spreadsheet, whether it be putting a pie chart together or a graphic related on a specific column and row and getting that information described to them. We've seen Aira being used obviously for navigation in the workplace. So the barriers that a lot of people think is out there for this is security, but Aira has been able to partner with so many companies that I've listed before that security is really not an issue anymore. The idea of a human, remote human giving information used to be something that people thought would never happen, and now it's happened everywhere, and it's something that's being accepted now. And so that's a big turning of a Titanic ship that I like to call, because we saw that wasn't happening 6-7 years ago, and now it's happening in a multitude of places. So we're really excited about that.
Well, I hope the Titanic ship keeps turning and moving forward rather than anything else. I think that's very exciting to hear. You know, I love the experience that you talk about somebody hiring 100 people and recruiting them and maintaining them and you know, giving them access. But I also heard you talk about how the use case that you started with, which was navigation, suddenly also evolved based on the users that you were working with, and it expanded per se. So, you know, from an Aira perspective, if I was to think about, you know, the importance of people with disabilities who are your customer base, how do you see that interaction happen so that you can make a more user-friendly product which works for them? And how do you do it today?
Repeat the question again, please.
So how do you evolve from just a navigation tool to all the other things as use cases? So what all did you do to, you know, get people with disabilities to be a part of that journey of you understanding the various use cases?
Well, we incorporated blind and low vision, our customers from the start. That's who we went to. That's who we spoke to. We created use group cases with blind and low vision individuals, working with the National Federation of the Blind, American Council of the Blind. We worked with finding blind individuals and finding what they wanted, and then taking that and working with employers on accommodations and how visual interpreting can be brought in as an accommodation piece. So we really looked to the users of Aira to direct us in how we were going to move forward and how we were going to evolve. Our trained visual interpreters, they work directly with these explorers, and they listen to the explorers, and they are there to provide the service directly to the blind users.
Fabulous. So which actually takes me to Manish. And Manish, you talked about nothing, you know, without us, right? And that is exactly what Aira is doing in building their solution. So how do you look at, you know, ensuring that it's people with disabilities who are part of the process, but also you're going to see AI come into play, and how are we going to balance, you know, that entire experience for people with disabilities?
Yeah, I mean, if I can go a little deeper into what I was talking about, you know, responsible AI, and in the context of accessibility or people with disabilities, AI obviously has a lot of potential to bring a lot more equity. So, you know, I can do things faster. As a blind person, I could summarize a long web page, which is complex and has a lot of sections, and, you know, I could just ask ChatGPT to summarize it for me, or things like that. But there are certain principles, and Jenny, if you attended the keynote in the morning, referred to them. I talk about them a lot as well. There are three things that I primarily talk about. What we need for AI to be responsible from an accessibility perspective, or from people with disabilities perspective. One is the bare minimum. It needs to be accessible, right? I mean, if you cannot, if you don't make your tools accessible, this whole potential benefit of that it can provide to people with disabilities is just lost. And instead of reducing the disability divide, it'll just create a big, huge gulf. The second is representational data. In that one is again huge and needs the inclusion of people with disabilities in the creation of that data and in testing that data is representative. Today, if I was to go to ChatGPT and in any prompt, if I say that I'm blind, the first thing in the response is, oh, I'm sorry, you're blind. I'm not sorry that I'm blind. So, and ChatGPT is not making it up, right? I mean, it's showing us the mirror of, it is trained on human-generated data. And so it's showing us the mirror of the society and how the society thinks about it, about accessibility and disabilities. So we need representative data and to be able to remove that bias from the training data that we are creating for these AI systems. And a lot of that needs to be done by, we call it red teaming, where people with disabilities will go in and try to trick all these systems into giving them the wrong answer. And it's only people with disabilities who can do that because they know how to get those wrong answers. The third piece is the whole aspect of feedback. When these systems go out, I mean, the traditional forms of testing, you do WCAG testing, you do compliance testing, those don't apply to these systems anymore, right? I mean, these are black box systems that it is very hard to tell how they came up with that answer. And, so when these systems get deployed, or as they are being deployed, we need systems or robust systems that are able to collect feedback from people with disabilities who run into issues and biases like the one that I just mentioned. And then those have that feedback loop to go correct these things. These are very critical for things like hiring that Julika and Jonathan were mentioning earlier, because a lot of these tools are going to get used for making hiring decisions on resumes, right? I mean, we opened a job with one of the organizations that I work for, and within 2 days we got 800 resumes. So, recruiters are going to rely more and more on AI systems to sort out these resumes and what do you have if you have bias built in, right? So, those are the kinds of things that I talk about. I'll let Jonathan talk about if he has anything more.
Oh, no, I was just agreeing with you, 100%, absolutely.
Well, now you should add to it. Yeah. So when you think about what, Manish is saying, right, I know you agree with it, but what is your perspective, on how companies can look at the accommodation process, and what would you recommend companies do while they hire people with disabilities?
That's such a great question. I have a mixed relationship with the idea of accommodations. First, I love them having a disability and understand the importance of making sure that we have an equitable workplace. But it bothers me that we have to go through a separate process. It feels like it's an othering process. So my vision or my goal, I think that's shared by many other people as well, is to just remove the process and make technology, assistive technology, available on demand as you need it, and not have to say, please, can I install this application on my computer so I can do my job better? Instead, just flip that. Here's the technology. You have access to whatever you need to do your job better, right? Flip that model. So and not only do you make assistive technology available to folks with disabilities, you make it available to everybody so that everybody can learn from it and sort of engage in those different types of experiences. I would love if we all sort of considered flipping that model and making sure that everyone has what they need to do their job well.
Which is literally flipping the model, because today it's all about asking for an accommodation,
yes,
requesting an accommodation. So here's an example. So this is a conversation that happened last week with me and a large a global consulting firm. And we were asked to provide a list of assistive technology that they should allow within the organization. Now this is one of the top 3 leading consulting firms in the world. And when they asked me this question, they actually had no clue about accommodations at all. Their thought process of accommodation was literally as limited as a screen reader or a magnifier, and nothing beyond that. And then when you see that, and you talk about providing on demand, but there is another side to the problem, Jonathan, which is even, at least like, I'm from India, and people don't necessarily know their choices of accommodation. Right?
That is absolutely correct.
So how do you provide that, knowledge and framework as an organization?
Well, one first step is hire more folks with disabilities and capture their voice as an associate, right? And of course, there's all different kinds of disabilities. The tools that I would need, having ADHD, would be very different from other folks with different types of disabilities. If you hire more folks with disabilities, that voice becomes stronger internally. Also, look at the market. What are other companies like you doing, right? What is your competition doing? Because you want to do better than them, not only in the market, but with your associates as well, right? And then maybe your customers as well. Maybe you can glean insights from your customers' requests, right? So listening is active listening, design thinking, and inclusive design.
Interesting. I employ about 160 people with disabilities in my team of 270 people. And every one of them has a different ask, and it's fine, and it should be fine. And you can hear the nuances in their ask, and it is sometimes something as simple as, I need something to stop the glare on my screen, right? Down to something as much as, can I get a screen reader, or even eye gaze solutions, etc. But I think the key here is about also, diversity, equity, and inclusion teams knowing more about how to have these conversations and how to bring that forward. And I think we literally need a playbook on that somewhere. And I hope somebody goes out and creates it one day for all of us to use. Which then takes me to Jilika, because Jilika, you're working with an audience which is often underserved, even more underserved than some of the other groups at times, because they might not even self-identify or even know that there might be a challenge. Because I know so many people who say that, at 27 or 28, I now know I'm neurodivergent and I've just been diagnosed. And you see so many of those conversations. So, what is your perspective on how do we include neurodivergent people in the workplace?
Yeah. So we've done a bit of research on this. We have around 40,000 neurodivergent job seekers that we serve, and a lot of large organizations. And sort of what we've seen with these different companies is almost this repetitive set of stages that we often see companies go through, starting with inception, where you have a few folks that are raising their hand and saying, I'm neurodivergent, I need accommodations. And typically the organization's motivated by risk mitigation. How do I solve this problem ASAP? Then we see programs starting to get built, the targeted model where you have champions that are coming into the organization and starting programs to hire, let's say 5, 10, 20 neurodivergents within that. And then we see department leaders raising their hand and saying, I'm neurodivergent, or I have a family member, or I have a disability, and actually saying across my, let's say, CIO organization, I'm going to open up all my roles to be accessible for neurodivergence. And the gold standard eventually is we want company-wide neuro-inclusion, right? Every single job posted on a career site to be accessible for neurodivergence. And so I think when we talk about, where do we see this going, we ideally hope that every recruiter is trained or has some awareness of how to interact with, respond to, accommodate neurodivergent in the interview process. We have a world where hiring managers are aware, even if they don't have a family member or affinity for neurodivergence, they are leading with EQ-driven principles where they're understanding and listening and providing that support. And then all the way to every employee providing allyship, being a supportive partner in the journey. And so that's kind of how we see the companies, grow on this journey. And eventually, there is a stat that 1 in every 7 are neurodivergent, and that means that 20%, 15 to 20% of your organization today, is neurodivergent. And as you said, so many don't disclose. And so creating that psychologically safe work environment is where we want to move towards. How can we open these conversations up? How can teammates, leaders, employees, associates step up and say, I am neurodivergent and these are the challenges that I go through. These are the disabilities I face on a daily basis. Here's how you can support me. I think that's where kind of we hope to see the future of corporate America and Fortune 500s, and eventually, small businesses too, evolve towards to actually include this population.
Jonathan.
Can I add on to that?
Absolutely.
That was brilliant. And basically the way I interpreted that is a growing awareness of accessibility and inclusion within that organization. And personally, one thing that I've found is the more I self-ID, the more I say I have ADHD, the more people come up to me and say, you know what, I do too, or I have dyslexia, or I have this other thing. And it creates that conversation, and it creates an environment where it's comfortable to talk about this, right? Which is an ideal state. I love that.
Absolutely.
It's like a culture shift, right, within an organization. It's everybody shifting towards this, this direction. And it's interesting both of you talk about listening, active listening, empathy. It's the same language that we are all speaking. I think we just need to get it out into the larger world and have everybody think like us. So I'm hoping that happens soon. To Jenny's point this morning, when are you going to be able to turn this around? Hopefully faster than we've all gotten here. And it's interesting that there's a question on the Slack channel asking about, how do we actually build self-identification in the workplace? And both of you have talked about that. But I brought that question up so that once we finish with Karthik, if everybody else can also think about it, how do we actually promote self-identification? What can we do, and how can we build an ecosystem that make people comfortable to self-disclose? But from Julika, first coming to Karthik. So Karthik, when you talk about your solutions, or you talk about any solution, one of the biggest things that you see are these myths that employers have in their minds about whether they should be using technology in the workplace. Everett talked about security and privacy being a concern. There are often other things that employers think about when they think about this. So, in your world of solutioning with Envision, what are some of the challenges that you see, and how do you actually walk employers through some of those myths that they have, or how do you bust those myths that they have?
I think we don't think of it like, we need to convince the employer. I think it always starts with the end user for us. It's they who actually take the classes into the workplace, for example, or start using the Envision app in the workplace, and that starts to become a point of conversation. So that's usually how we go about it. And even when we try to, say, work with enterprises, it's always been, what's the most benefit that we can give to an individual versus, and then start from there and then build up towards trying to convince the employer that this is the right option to go for. A lot of times what we noticed is that people have very wrong notions of assistive technology. I think the assistive technology that a lot of people are used to thinking about is the legacy assistive tech, as I'd like to call it, the big scanners that you have to put on your desktop, and that's only capable of doing one particular piece of, one particular thing at a time, and it's clunky, it's bulky, and it just doesn't get the job done. to the new age assistive technology, which is powered by artificial intelligence, which means that it can actually do a lot more. Pretty much, it's a green field, right? You can customize the tool for the person who's using it. You can, over a period of time, because it's software, you can actually go ahead and have, for example, the glasses or any new age assistive tech that's powered by AI constantly keep improving itself, constantly expand the kind of things it can do. So the big myth that we often have to bust with employers is that this is very different from the AT that you have known all these years. This is not, I wouldn't even call it assistive tech. It's just, it's just a tool that helps someone at the workplace to actually go about doing their things more independently. And I think companies like Envision or Aira, they all come under that space where the tools are very versatile. It's not as expensive as it used to be. And so we try to focus first on, the end users, trying to make sure that they have the best possible experience. And then they themselves sometimes just go out there and talk to their managers and say, hey, you know what, I've been using this app and I'd like to get the glasses. And so then we start having the conversation. And even then, it's always not straightforward. But then eventually, when the managers start to see that, yes, this is a tool like a smartphone or a computer, rather than just a clunky device that sits on a table that costs thousands of dollars, it can do a lot more. Then they start to open up their minds and see new possibilities.
Wow. So again, it comes back to the user very often, education, and that gets you a buy-in. Yeah. But you're so right. I remember when I started off in my career, you talk about these large magnifier machines that we bought, or these chunky Braille printers that you had. The eye gaze solutions, I remember, were so humongous that somebody they weren't really portable at that point of time. And so much of that has changed. And I hear Everett, having a view on this. So what do you think, Everett? How is technology evolving as per you?
Well, I remember the first Kurzweil reader that was the size of a washing machine, providing OCR, character recognition at that time. And it was massive, and it cost some $80,000 at the time. So it was intense to know how much technology used to cost and how big and bulky it was. And it's funny, too, I talk with young blind people nowadays who, they have their phone, their portable Braille display, and they're out and about and doing whatever they want to do in life. And they even complain that the not even 1 pound Braille display is too much to carry sometimes. And I remember when we carried Braille writers that weighed 25 pounds and CCTVs that were in 2 pieces that we had to roll in on a cart from class to class. So it really has changed. But getting back to your question before a minute ago, I think that the biggest thing that we need to help talent acquisition professionals and human resource managers, we need to help them understand that disabilities are acceptable. Mm-hmm. Disabilities are normal. Disabilities are something that just happen every day, and many people have them. And so I remember I used to work for Blockbuster Video, and it used to be human resource managers were taught to tell hiring managers at stores, you can't ever ask about a disability. You can't ever ask. It's against the law. And so I'd sit there and I go, well, couldn't I just talk about it? And no, you can't talk. I mean, well, I'm the blind manager hiring. How can I not talk about it? And yet that's the way it was. And I think the paradigm is definitely shifting. I think talent acquisition portals, professionals are doing a great job of normalizing disability and just treating it, allowing individuals to feel comfortable disclosing. And we need more of that. We need disabilities to be accepted. And that's the biggest thing we can do to change and make it to where more people feel included and they feel comfortable disclosing that they have a disability.
That is so well said. I think it's about, somebody's asking, how do we take away that stigma? How do we get more people to disclose? And you actually have a question to that, Jonathan, where somebody's asking you, do you have any specific strategies to encourage senior leaders to self-disclose and executives to self-disclose?
Oh. You can start by self-IDing on yourself, on your own. And I've actually seen this be very effective with leadership as well. The more open you are about discussing this space, the more open and comfortable other people are. In fact, I've had great experiences with leaders self-IDing after you are confident and comfortable enough to self-ID yourself. And my experience has been I've been increasingly seeing that more and more and more. The more I talk about it, the more other people seem to be able to talk about it as well. And also there's the point that we should all remember is that we are all going to have a disability at some point. All of us. As we get older every day, it's just a part of being human, right? So we should remind each other that this is part of human culture, and it's part of who we are, and we're all different, but we should celebrate those differences, all right? But again, the more you talk about it, the more people are comfortable, I think, to open up on their own side too.
Well, interestingly said. So here's a situation. I have something called a familial tremor, so anybody who ever meets me will see me hold a glass and kind of tremor through it. In the country that I live in, it is not a disability, right? It doesn't fall under our definition. So there are so many different, aspects to all of this. So when I self-disclose, because the moment I self-disclose, so let's say I'm on a podium and speaking, my tremor will increase because I'm stressed or I'm worried, etc. And then the moment I self-disclose, suddenly my tremor stops. It kind of knows that I have self-disclosed and I'm accepting of the situation and the people. And I think that's what you're talking about, Jonathan, about kind of bringing that out into the open, which is phenomenal.
That's so interesting. By recognizing it, then it goes away.
Yeah,
It does.
I mean, I have an example of very similar, but more similar to what Jonathan was saying. We had iAccessible work with the design team on co-designing something, where there were like blind people in the room giving feedback on design, where this design team had never worked with. They had no idea that they could ask blind people questions about design. So, we had this session, and towards the end of the session, there's this, the lead says, I've had dyslexia, but I've never told anyone. So there's this thing where people are able to come out when they see that, this is normal, this can work, and they're able to talk about it.
Yeah, I think it's especially powerful when it's coming from leadership. I just, thought about this. I think because of the stigma that exists with disability, it's sometimes so hard to have representation across like cultures and also positions in an organization. And oftentimes disability is sort of associated with weakness almost, which it really shouldn't be, because when you have folks in leadership positions that are, driving change, that have, progressed significantly in their careers, and you're seeing that reflected on, in the boardroom, in the C-suite, across the organization, across managers, it's almost changing it to see it as a strength. Like this is, I'm here and I'm able to see things differently and build innovative technology because of my differences. So yeah, it made me think when we were talking about disclosing as a leader, it almost changes the narrative so much when you have folks come out about it on a public forum as well.
True. So by any chance, does anybody here have any tangible case study or an example of a link between hiring disabled people and neurodivergent employees and innovation? Yeah. Because technology is so much about all of that. So anybody has an example to share? We've got a question on that.
Yeah, no, I think I see that a lot at Envision. So we have a lot of people who are blind and low vision, who directly work on the product. And so they're the ones using the product and designing the product at the same time. And one very interesting thing that happened early on was when we built the first version of the Envision app, as a technologist, as an AI engineer enthusiast, I was extremely focused on getting Envision to give nice captions of the things around you. So you take a picture and it gives you like a nice little caption of what the picture is in natural language. And in my head, I thought that was the coolest feature that we could possibly have. And there was a close second feature that we built as well in the very first version, which was just a very clunky OCR solution. You take a picture and then it gives you like a dump of all the text, and it wouldn't even format the text in the right way. It would just speak everything out. And I thought, amongst the two, people are going to be most taken by the captioning feature. And so we had our first intern at that time who was working with us. He was a design intern, and he was studying design in the Netherlands. And when I sat down and I started using the app with him and figuring out how he uses the app, 9 out of 10 times he used the OCR feature versus the image captioning feature, right? And I'm here, I spent almost 8 months of my life perfecting this image captioning thing, and he was not even using it 10% of the time. Right? And it's when I had this conversation with him is when I realized that text is the most dominant visual medium that's there around us. Like everything around us is text. And one of the key things that AI can help do is give access to that textual information that's around us. And so that was like a key starting point in like understanding how co-creation can be like a useful way of building a product. Even today at Envision, we have something called the Envisioners Day, where we invite people from across Europe, users of the product, new users. We also ask them to bring like a +1, and it's like a little party that we have in the office. And when we invite them, what we do is we put a person from our beta testing team, and then one of a blind or low vision designer or a tester in the room, along with the AI engineers and another product designer, and we see all 4 of them collaborate on a feature at once. And it's crazy to watch because sometimes the product designer will think this is the most important thing, but then when it actually goes into the hands of one of the people that we're co-creating with, then it becomes something else, and the AI engineer is tweaking the AI on the fly to respond to the changes that the person wants. And so we have this slightly messy, elaborate, but very, very needed feedback loop with the ones who are building the product that we eventually want to sell. Right? So I think that's a very tangible use case in the very early days of Envision, where 8 months of effort completely thrown away, and this one feature that I didn't even put 2 weeks into it, and that ended up becoming the thing that people use the most.
Wow. Julika, any such experiences with you?
Yeah, in terms of case studies, I mean, we're trying to build this out every day with large organizations because you want to show productivity of hiring talent from this population. And so there was everyone refers to the Accenture study. I think that's a really phenomenal one. Neurodiverse teams being 30% more productive, teams that include people with disabilities, non-disabled individuals as well, kind of working together in synergy can be 30% more productive because you're representing the world that you live in, with the team that's building that tech. And then, I mean, in terms of data on this, I think that's potentially a huge gap that we see. How can we go to leadership of different organizations and demonstrate that, you're getting increased ROI benefits, you're getting increased innovation, increased productivity by bringing in neurodivergence, I think, and people with disabilities. I think that is something that we should all strive to sort of build that metrics and accountability into how we're reporting the data and how genuinely the outcomes of it are. I know someone we spoke with at LinkedIn, actually in India, in Bangalore, was mentioning that they hired neurodivergents onto their team, specifically neurodivergent engineers, one with dyslexia, one with OCD, one with autism, and they reported that the outcomes of those engineers almost significantly outperformed other teams. And I think all of us, in the teams that we operate in have an opportunity to, not only hire as we talk about and also measure
What is the impact of that? And then take that to teams across our organization and advocate for that. Because it's great to talk about, and then how do we actually take that and drive impact? And I think numbers and metrics really do drive impact, especially when you take that to boardrooms and executive tables. So it's a great question, and I wish we had more data on it. So it's a great call to action.
It is surely one. And, Manish, let's come to you on a question that there is. So, so the person is wondering if employee hiring platforms and their accessibility can play a role in increasing the hiring of people with disabilities. So I can give you an example of when we went looking for an HRMS system, we couldn't find an accessible one, that was truly there. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's so true. I mean, hiring all the way from recruitment systems, even just to apply for a job is so hard for a screen reader user. For low vision users, I mean, magnifiers, they just kill all these hiring websites. Then there's the human bias, the AI bias that I already talked about. Then you've got to get past the interviewing systems where you might, if you're a technical person like me, you've got to go write code in the interview, which might be a completely inaccessible system. Once you get past the interview, then you've got to go into the organization and work there. I mean, we had a finance intern come in, and their manager looked at 26 different applications that they could potentially work on in a given day.
Wow.
They sliced and diced their job role in different ways. And we found that all 26 of those applications were completely unacceptable. So, and these are all like industry applications, and the finance department is small, they don't build those applications. So who goes and fixes them? So these are real problems that people run into without systemic change, where procurement makes sure accessibility is there in the systems that we buy. Hiring makes sure that the interviewing systems they put together are accessible. So all of those.
Fabulous. We actually have just 1 minute to go. So I'm going to ask everybody to give me a quick one call to action from each of you to the crowd of what would you want them to do futuristically? And this is a question I didn't give you earlier on. So Everett, do you want to start?
Sure. If I had one call to action, I would say be acceptable of people with disabilities. Accept them. Think of them as everyday normal people. That is the biggest thing, and get away from the inspiration type, the inspiration thought process that people with disabilities, sure, they're inspiring, but don't dwell on that. Don't focus on that. Focus on that it's acceptable to have people with disabilities in your workplace every day, participating in leadership roles that you want people with disabilities can fill them.
Fabulous. Karthik?
AI is one of the biggest, I would say, revolutions that have happened in the assistive technology space, and I think not a lot of employers are actually adopting it in this particular instance. So I would wish more employers be more open to adopting AI in the workplace for assistive technology.
Manish?
Hire people with disabilities, however you can. If you cannot hire them full time, work with organizations that can bring people exposure to people with disabilities. The more people interact with, people with disabilities, it becomes normal. People understand how we use technology, how we are able to work in the workplace, and that normalization of biases and attitudes is the most important thing.
Jonathan?
Be supportive. Let's be supportive of our community. If you have a disability, talk about it and support other folks with disabilities, especially even if they have a different type of disability than your own. We should all be working together to promote inclusion, and that's how we should all be partnering.
Shilika?
This one's tough. I think two things. One is when it comes to assuming competence, especially for folks who might, present in ways that might be different from what we expect. I think it's so important to assume capability, assume skill. Don't sort of judge based on what meets the cover. Go deeper and try to understand what is the true skill and ability of this individual, regardless of, external appearance or presumed disability. And second is, I think we have to move away from, when budget cuts happen and we have an economic crisis, oftentimes the first thing that gets slashed is the DEI budget, right? And so I think the next step for us is how can we show ROI? How can we make hiring people with disabilities not just a DEI initiative? How can we make it a part of demonstrating increased productivity, profits for the company, and increasing bottom line? I think that's sort of the next stage that we need to encourage, talent acquisition leaders and HR managers to embrace.
And I think for me, the call to action is go out and hire people with disabilities on your own team. If you start doing that, we will get there. So thank you, everybody. This has been an amazing conversation. Thank you for being on the podium on behalf of M-Enabling G3 ICT and myself. And it's been fun. And thank you, the audience. Thanks for your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you to our panelists, and our next session will begin at 5:30 p.m. in this room. And just a reminder, please don't miss your opportunity to have a professional headshot taken while you're here at the M-Enabling Summit. Our photographer is located outside of Salon 3, sponsored by Level Access. And if you have not picked up your badge, please do so at registration. Thank you, and we'll see you back here at 5:30. Good evening, everyone. If you'll kindly take your seats, our program will begin momentarily. If you'll kindly take your seats, our program will begin momentarily. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. If you'll kindly take your seats, our program is ready to begin. Good evening and thank you. If you'll kindly take your seats, our program is about to begin. Good evening, everyone. If you'll kindly take your seats, our program is ready to begin. Good evening, everyone. If you'll kindly join us in the ballroom and take your seats, our program will begin.
It's okay. This happens. How are you? I'm good. How are you? I'm good. Ready? Not really. They like asked me to do this very recently, so let's go with it. Thank you. Yeah.
Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. At this time, please welcome to the stage the President and CEO of the American Association of People with Disabilities, Maria Town.
Hello, everyone, and good evening. I know that this session is between all of you and a networking happy hour. but I promise that your patience will be worth it. Again, my name is Maria Town, and I serve as the president and CEO of the American Association of People with Disabilities, and I have the distinct honor and pleasure this evening of kicking off our celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Rehabilitation Act, and the pleasure of introducing Rachel Patterson, the Director for Disability Policy in the White House Domestic Policy Council. The Rehabilitation Act was radical. It was the first piece of federal legislation that extended civil rights to people with disabilities. It said that federal agencies and entities receiving federal funding could not discriminate against people on the basis of disability. I actually have always found it funny that the Rehabilitation Act said that as disabled people, we don't need to be rehabilitated. We can come as we are and deserve access. And as much as it was radical, it was also foundational. The Americans with Disabilities Act and many other federal civil rights standards around disability are based off of the Rehabilitation Act. Internationally, the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities would not exist as it is without the Rehabilitation Act. And the Rehabilitation Act wouldn't exist itself without advocacy and without collaboration between service providers and advocates. We could have actually been celebrating this anniversary a year earlier, but President Nixon vetoed 2 different versions of the Rehabilitation Act, and it took people with disabilities led by the late, great Judy Heumann. That's right. Protesting in front of President Nixon's offices in New York City to get him to sign this bill. It took people invested in accessible technology to really figure out what the Rehab Act's civil rights non-discrimination protections actually meant in real terms. And we're in an exciting moment right now, which Rachel is going to tell us about, because many components of the Rehabilitation Act are being updated today for the first time in this landmark piece of legislation's existence. So without further ado, again, it is my honor to introduce Rachel Patterson, the Director of Disability Policy for the White House Domestic Policy Council. The White House Domestic Policy Council advances the President's domestic policy agenda, and Rachel has an incredibly difficult job. She is responsible for not only embedding disability priorities in that agenda, but ensuring that disabled people are represented within every aspect of it. So she's laughing, but I know from my own experience in the White House that she has had to become an expert